The alarm clock screamed at 4:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 8 months. David rolled over and slammed his hand on the old digital clock, its red numbers burning through the darkness of his small apartment. His back ached from the cheap mattress they'd been sleeping on since moving to this place. It wasn't much, but it was all he could afford after losing their real home. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, rubbing his eyes and trying to push away the worry that never seemed to leave his chest. In the next room, he could hear his 9-year-old daughter Lily breathing softly in her sleep. At least she was sleeping well. Her asthma had been acting up again lately, and last night she'd needed her inhaler twice. David quietly got dressed in his work uniform, a simple blue shirt and black pants that he'd washed in the sink the night before. He couldn't afford the laundromat every week. Every dollar had to be stretched as far as possible. He looked at himself in the cracked bathroom mirror and tried to straighten his shirt. The bags under his eyes were getting darker, and he'd lost weight over the past few months. But he had to keep going. Lily was counting on him. He grabbed his wallet from the kitchen counter and opened it slowly, already knowing what he'd find. $47. That was it. That was everything they had until his next paycheck in 3 days. $20 had to go to Lily's school lunch account. She'd been eating the free breakfast they offered, but lunch wasn't free. The rest was for their bus fare to get around the city since his car had been taken away. The thought of losing his car still made his stomach hurt. He'd worked so hard to pay for that old Honda. But when Lily's medical bill started piling up and his ex-wife left them with all the debt, something had to give. The bank took the car back, and now they depended on public transportation to get everywhere. David walked over to Lily's room and gently shook her shoulder. "Hey, sunshine, time to wake up," he whispered. She opened her big brown eyes and smiled at him. That same smile that kept him going every single day, no matter how tired he was. "Morning, Daddy," she said, sitting up and immediately reaching for her inhaler on the nightstand. David's heart clenched as he watched her take 2 puffs. The medicine was expensive, but it was the one thing he would never go without no matter what. "How are you feeling today, baby?" he asked, sitting on her bed and smoothing her messy hair. "Good. Can we get pancakes for breakfast?" she asked hopefully. David's chest tightened. They had cereal, the cheap kind, and that was about it. "How about we have our special cereal with extra milk?" he said with a smile he hoped looked real. "And maybe this weekend we can think about pancakes." Lily nodded, used to these kinds of answers now. She was such a good kid, never complaining, never asking for too much. Sometimes, David wondered if she understood more about their situation than he wanted her to. They ate breakfast together at their small kitchen table, the only table they had left after selling most of their furniture. Lily chatted about school and her friends while David tried to calculate in his head how they'd make it through the next few days. His first job started at 6 a.m. at a warehouse across town. He'd work there until 2 p.m., then rush to his second job at a grocery store that started at 3 p.m. He wouldn't get home until almost 11 p.m. Mrs. Rodriguez from downstairs had agreed to watch Lily after school for $20 a week. Money David could barely spare, but he had no choice. The free after-school program at Lily's school had a waiting list, and single dads apparently weren't high priority. "Daddy, are you okay?" Lily asked, looking at him with those wise eyes that seemed too old for her face. "I'm perfect, sweetheart. Just thinking about work," he said, forcing another smile. "You ready for school?" They gathered their things. David's work bag with his lunch, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple, and Lily's backpack that was starting to fall apart at the seams. David made a mental note to look for tape to fix the strap that was coming loose. The walk to the bus stop was cold. David wished he could afford a better coat for Lily, but the one she had would have to do for now. She slipped her small hand into his as they walked, and he squeezed it gently. "Daddy, when I grow up, I'm going to have lots of money so I can buy you a car," Lily said out of nowhere. David stopped walking for a second, his throat getting tight. "You don't need to worry about that, baby. You just focus on being a kid and doing good in school, okay? But I want to help you. You work so hard." David knelt down in front of her right there on the sidewalk, not caring about the people walking around them. "Listen to me, Lily. You help me every single day just by being you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I would work 100 jobs if it meant keeping you safe and happy. Okay?" She nodded and hugged him tight. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you more than all the stars in the sky," he whispered back. The bus ride to Lily's school was quiet. She dozed against his shoulder while he watched the city wake up outside the window. Business people in expensive suits talked on their phones. People headed to jobs that probably paid more in a day than David made in a week. But he tried not to be bitter. He'd had a good job once. Before Lily was born, before she got sick, before everything fell apart. Maybe someday he'd get back to that. For now, he just had to keep moving forward. After dropping Lily off at school, David took 2 more buses to get to his warehouse job. His supervisor, Tony, was already there drinking coffee from a mug that probably cost more than David's lunch. "You're 3 minutes late." "Rivera," Tony said without looking up. David wanted to explain about the buses running behind schedule, about having to take 3 different routes to get there, but he just nodded. "Sorry, won't happen again." The work was hard, lifting boxes, loading trucks, sorting packages for 8 hours straight. His hands got cut up from the rough cardboard and his back screamed by lunchtime. But it was honest work, and it paid enough to keep them afloat. Barely. During his lunch break, David sat outside on a loading dock and called Mrs. Rodriguez to check on Lily. She was doing homework and feeling fine. No asthma attacks today. That was good news, at least. The afternoon dragged on forever. David's feet were killing him in his old work boots that needed replacing, but boots cost money they didn't have. By 2 p.m. he was exhausted, but his day was only half over. The bus ride to his second job gave him 30 minutes to rest and grab a quick snack from the vending machine at the grocery store. Then it was time to stock shelves, help customers, and clean floors until closing time. His manager at the store, Beth, was nicer than Tony. She knew about his situation and sometimes let him take home food that was about to expire. It helped stretch their grocery budget. "You look tired, David," Beth said as he clocked in. "I'm fine, just ready to work," he replied, grateful for her concern but not wanting to seem weak. The evening hours passed slowly. His feet hurt, his back ached, and all he wanted was to go home and hug his daughter. Around 9 p.m., a coworker mentioned that her son's little league team was selling candy bars for fundraising. David wanted to buy one to help, but he just couldn't afford it. Every dollar was already spoken for. Finally, at 10:45 p.m., David's shift ended. The bus ride home seemed to take forever, and he dozed off twice, jerking awake when the bus stopped. He was so tired he could barely keep his eyes open. When he finally made it back to their neighborhood, David realized he'd have to take the subway to get home faster. The last bus had already stopped running, and he needed to get home to relieve Mrs. Rodriguez. The subway cost the same as the bus, but it would get him there quicker. As he walked down into the subway station, David checked his wallet one more time. $47. Tomorrow he'd put $20 into Lily's lunch account, leaving them $27 for the rest of the week. It would be tight, but they'd figure it out. They always did. The subway platform was busy even this late at night. David found a spot to wait and closed his eyes for just a moment, feeling the weight of the day on his shoulders. In a few minutes he'd be home with Lily, and that made everything worth it. The subway platform was buzzing with late-night energy. David stood near the yellow safety line, checking his phone for the train schedule. Just 5 more minutes and he'd be on his way home to Lily. His legs felt like concrete blocks after 16 hours of work, and his shoulders ached from lifting boxes all day. But knowing his daughter was waiting for him gave him the strength to keep standing. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the cool underground air wash over his face. Tomorrow would be another long day, but at least it was Friday. Maybe this weekend he could take Lily to the park, the free one with the broken swings that she still loved anyway. Simple things made her happy, which was both a blessing and a reminder of how much he wished he could give her more. A soft crying sound made David open his eyes. At first he thought it might be a child, but as he looked around, he spotted a woman sitting alone on one of the metal benches about 20 feet away. She was hunched over, her face buried in her hands, and her shoulders were shaking. David glanced around the platform. People were everywhere. Business people heading home late, college students with backpacks, workers like himself finishing their shifts. But everyone seemed to be looking at their phones or staring at the tracks, completely ignoring the crying woman. The woman looked to be in her 50s, with gray hair that was usually probably neat but now looked messy and disheveled. She was wearing what appeared to be an expensive coat, navy blue wool that looked warm and well-made. But there was a large tear on the left sleeve and dirt stains on the front that looked fresh. David found himself taking a step closer, then stopped. He had his own problems. He needed to get home. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting, and she charged extra for every 15 minutes he was late. Money he couldn't afford to lose. But the woman's crying got a little louder, and David noticed her hands were shaking. Something was really wrong. A businessman in a sharp suit walked right past her, talking loudly on his phone about some meeting tomorrow. A group of college kids laughed as they passed, not even glancing in her direction. An elderly man with a cane sat down on the bench across from her, looked uncomfortable for a moment, then got up and moved to a different spot. David felt something twist in his chest. This reminded him of the time Lily had gotten lost at the grocery store last year. For 10 terrifying minutes, she'd been alone and scared while strangers walked past her tears. When he'd finally found her, she'd thrown herself into his arms and said, "Daddy, everyone just walked by me like I wasn't there." Taking a deep breath, David walked over to the woman. As he got closer, he could see that her expensive-looking purse was gone. Her phone was on the bench beside her, but the screen was completely shattered. There were small scratches on her hands, and her coat wasn't just torn. It looked like someone had grabbed it roughly. "Excuse me," David said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Are you okay?" The woman looked up, and David saw tear-streaked makeup and eyes full of fear and confusion. She was definitely older than him, maybe in her early 50s, with kind eyes that reminded him of his own mother. She started, then broke down crying again. "I'm so sorry. I'm not usually like this." David sat down on the bench beside her, leaving some space so she wouldn't feel crowded. "It's okay. Take your time." "What happened?" The woman wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I was mugged," she said quietly. "About 6 blocks from here. 2 men. They took my purse, my money, everything. They pushed me down and I hit the sidewalk." She gestured to the torn coat and the scratches on her hands. David's stomach dropped. "Did you call the police?" She held up her broken phone. "They broke this when I tried to call for help. And this is going to sound so stupid, but I don't know anyone's phone number by heart anymore. Everything was in my phone. My husband's number, my kids' numbers, everything." David nodded. He understood completely. Who memorized phone numbers anymore when they were all saved in contacts? "Where do you live?" he asked. "Maybe I can help you figure out how to get home." "Riverside," she said. "It's about 40 minutes on the train. But I don't have any money for the fare. They took everything." Her voice cracked. "My husband doesn't even know where I am. He's probably worried sick. And my daughter, she's supposed to call me tonight. She lives in California and we talk every Friday at 11. She's going to think something terrible happened." David glanced at his watch. It was already 10:50 p.m. The woman continued, "I've been sitting here for almost an hour trying to figure out what to do. I asked a few people if I could borrow their phone, but everyone just kept walking. I don't blame them. I probably look like someone to avoid." "You don't look like that at all," David said honestly. "You look like someone who's had a really bad night." She managed a small smile through her tears. "Thank you. You're the first person who's even stopped to talk to me." David felt that familiar ache in his chest. The same feeling he got when he saw Lily try to hide her disappointment about things they couldn't afford. Here was someone's mother, someone's wife, sitting alone and scared while dozens of people walked past her. "What's your name?" David asked. "Catherine," she said. "And thank you for stopping. You don't know how much this means to me." David reached into his back pocket and pulled out his old wallet. His hands were a little shaky as he opened it. $47. He stared at the bills for a long moment. $20 was for Lily's lunch account. The rest was their bus fare for the weekend, money for laundry, maybe a small grocery run if they were careful. But Catherine needed to get home to her family. She needed to let them know she was safe. "The train to Riverside costs about $8, David said slowly. Catherine nodded. "I know it's a lot to ask, but is there any way? Could I possibly borrow money from you for the fare? If you give me your address, I promise I'll pay you back. I'll mail it to you tomorrow, I swear." David looked at her tear-stained face, then back at his wallet. Lily's lunch money, their weekend transportation, everything they had until his paycheck came in. But he thought about Lily again, about the way she'd felt when strangers ignored her tears. He thought about how he'd want someone to help his daughter if she was ever scared and alone in a strange place. "Don't worry about paying me back," David said, pulling out a $10 bill. "This should cover your train fare home." Catherine's eyes widened. "I can't take your money without paying you back." "That's not right." "It's okay," David said, pressing the bill into her hand. "Really, Everyone deserves to get home to their family safely. Catherine stared at the money, then at David. You have no idea what this means to me. But please, let me get your information so I can repay you. David shook his head. Just promise me you'll help someone else someday if you see them in trouble. That's payment enough. I don't understand, Catherine said. Most people wouldn't. I mean, you don't even know me. David smiled, thinking of Lily safe at home. My daughter teaches me every day that being kind is more important than being careful with money. Besides, you remind me of my mom. I'd want someone to help her if she was ever in your situation. Catherine's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these seemed different. Grateful instead of frightened. Your daughter is lucky to have you as a father. Just then, the train pulled into the station with a loud screech of brakes. David stood up as the doors opened. That's your train, he said. Go home to your family. Catherine stood too, clutching the $10 bill. Wait, at least tell me your name. David, he said, stepping toward his own train car. David, I will never forget this kindness. Never. David waved as Catherine hurried toward the Riverside train. Through the windows, he could see her finding a seat and pulling out her broken phone, probably trying to figure out how to contact her family when she got home. As David's train started moving, he sat down heavily in a plastic seat and opened his wallet again. $37. It would be a tight weekend, but they'd figure it out. Maybe he could pick up an extra shift somewhere. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Lily fell asleep on my couch. She's fine. See you soon. David smiled and closed his eyes. In 10 minutes, he'd be home with his daughter. And somewhere across the city, Catherine would be reuniting with her family too. That thought made the empty space in his wallet feel a little less important. Sometimes doing the right thing cost more than you could afford. But David had learned long ago that the cost of not helping someone was usually much higher. Catherine sat in the train seat, still clutching the $10 bill that David had given her. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, but her mind was racing. In 30 years of running her own company, she had never felt as helpless as she did tonight. And she had certainly never experienced such unexpected kindness from a complete stranger. The train rocked gently as it pulled away from the downtown station, heading toward the suburbs where her husband Michael was probably pacing the floor with worry. She looked down at her broken phone and wished she could somehow let him know she was safe. The muggers had taken everything, her purse, her credit cards, her identification, even the small emergency cash she always kept hidden in her wallet. But they hadn't taken her memory of the man who had helped her. Catherine closed her eyes and thought about David. He had looked exhausted, like someone who worked too hard for too little money. His clothes were clean but worn, his work boots scuffed and old. When he'd opened his wallet to give her the money, she'd glimpsed just how little he had. Yet without hesitation, he'd given her enough to get home safely. She had built her entire career on reading people, on understanding their motivations and character. In boardrooms and business meetings, she could spot dishonesty and hidden agendas from across the room. But David had been different. There was no angle, no hidden motive, just pure human kindness. The train pulled into Riverside Station at 11:25 p.m. Catherine hurried off and walked the familiar 6 blocks to her house, her torn coat flapping in the cold night air. She could see the lights on in every window. Michael had probably called their kids by now, maybe even the police. As she walked up the front steps of their large colonial home, the door flew open before she could even reach for her keys. Catherine, thank God. Michael rushed out and wrapped her in his arms. I've been calling you for hours. I was about to drive downtown and look for you myself. I'm okay, she whispered into his shoulder, finally allowing herself to break down. But it was awful, Michael. Really awful. Inside their warm house, she told him everything. About walking to her car after the late board meeting. About the 2 men who had followed her from the parking garage. About being pushed to the ground and having everything stolen. About sitting alone on that subway platform feeling invisible and afraid. But then this man, she said, pausing to wipe her eyes. This complete stranger named David stopped to help me. Everyone else just walked past like I wasn't even there. But he sat down and listened and... She held up the crumpled $10 bill. He gave me this so I could get home. And Michael, I could see in his wallet that this was probably all the money he had. Michael shook his head in amazement. Did you get his contact information? We need to pay him back and probably a lot more than $10. He wouldn't give it to me, Catherine said. He just said to help someone else someday. Can you believe that? In this day and age, someone actually still believes in paying it forward. That night, Catherine barely slept. She kept thinking about David's tired eyes, the gentleness in his voice when he'd said his daughter taught him that being kind was more important than being careful with money. She thought about how he'd compared her to his mother, how he'd wanted someone to help his own family if they were ever in trouble. By morning, Catherine had made a decision. I want to find him, she told Michael over breakfast. I want to find David and properly thank him. Michael looked concerned. Catherine, I understand the impulse, but the man obviously values his privacy. Maybe we should respect that. I'm not going to intrude on his life, she said. But I run a company with resources and I want to use them to find out who he is. Then I can figure out the right way to show my gratitude. Catherine had started her technology company 25 years ago, with nothing but determination and a small business loan. Now Richardson Technologies employed over 3,000 people and had offices in 12 cities. She had connections everywhere and she wasn't afraid to use them. By Monday morning, Catherine was back in her downtown office looking perfectly composed in one of her tailored business suits. No one would have guessed that just 3 nights earlier, she'd been sitting scared and alone on a subway platform. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. Jennifer, she called to her assistant, I need you to help me with something personal and confidential. Catherine explained what had happened, leaving out the most embarrassing details but emphasizing David's kindness. Jennifer, who had worked for Catherine for over 8 years, immediately understood the importance of the request. The subway system has security cameras at every station, Jennifer said thoughtfully. And if we know approximately what time this happened, we might be able to get footage. Catherine nodded. I have connections at the Transit Authority from our public transportation contracts. Let me make some calls. It took 3 days and several favors, but eventually Catherine found herself sitting in a small security office, watching grainy black and white footage from Friday night. There she was on the screen, sitting alone on the bench looking small and frightened. And there were all the people walking past her exactly as she remembered. Then David appeared in the frame. Catherine watched him notice her, hesitate, then approach. She could see their conversation, though there was no audio. She watched him pull out his wallet, count the money, then hand her the bill. The camera even caught his gentle smile as he wished her well. Can you enhance this image? Catherine asked the security technician. I need to see his face more clearly. With digital enhancement, they got a much clearer picture of David. Catherine studied his features, memorizing them. He looked even more tired than she remembered, but his expression was kind and patient. Now I need to find out who he is, she said to Jennifer later that day. This part proved more challenging. They tried facial recognition software, but David wasn't in any public databases. They checked employee records for the businesses near that subway stop, but came up empty. Catherine was starting to think she'd never find him when Jennifer had an idea. What if we check the Transit Authority's monthly pass records? She suggested. If he takes the subway regularly, he might have a monthly pass connected to a credit card or bank account. It was a long shot, but Catherine's determination was unwavering. After another day of research and calling in more favors, they finally got a lead. A monthly subway pass registered to David Rodriguez, with an address in a modest neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown. That's him, Catherine said, looking at the small photo on the transit record. That's definitely him. But instead of rushing over to his address, Catherine decided to learn more first. She hired a private investigation firm, not to invade David's privacy, but to understand his situation better so she could help appropriately. The report that came back broke Catherine's heart. David Rodriguez, 34 years old, single father to 9-year-old Lily. He'd lost his engineering job 3 years ago when his daughter was diagnosed with severe asthma and needed constant care. His ex-wife had left them with substantial medical debt before disappearing completely. David worked 2 jobs, warehouse work during the day, grocery store at night, trying to keep up with bills and medical expenses. He'd lost his car to repossession 2 months ago. He was 3 months behind on rent and facing eviction. The investigator had also interviewed David's employers and neighbors. Every single person described him as hardworking, honest, and devoted to his daughter. His warehouse supervisor said David never complained and never missed a day, even when he was clearly exhausted. His upstairs neighbor mentioned that she often heard him helping Lily with homework late at night, always patient and encouraging even after working 16-hour days. Catherine read the report twice, tears streaming down her face. Here was a man with an engineering degree, clearly intelligent and capable, working menial jobs just to survive, a loving father sacrificing everything for his child's health and happiness. And he'd given her, a complete stranger, money he desperately needed for his own family. "Jennifer," Catherine said, her voice shaking with emotion, "I want you to clear my calendar for the rest of the week. We have work to do." "What kind of work?" Jennifer asked. Catherine stood up and walked to her office window, looking out at the city where David was probably starting another brutal workday. "We're going to change someone's life," she said simply. "But we're going to do it right. David Rodriguez helped me when I needed it most, and he's about to discover that kindness really does come back to you." Catherine spent the next several hours making phone calls and developing a plan. She couldn't just show up at David's door with a check. His pride would never allow him to accept charity. But she could create opportunities, open doors, and use her connections to give him a chance at the life he deserved. She thought about her own children, now grown and successful, living comfortable lives because she'd been able to provide for them. David was doing everything right as a father, but circumstances had trapped him in a cycle he couldn't break alone. That was about to change. By the end of the week, Catherine had put several plans in motion. David didn't know it yet, but his life was about to take a dramatic turn for the better. And it all started with a $10 act of kindness on a subway platform. Catherine stared at the investigation report spread across her mahogany desk, reading David's story for the third time that morning. Each detail made her more determined to help, but also more aware of how carefully she'd need to proceed. Men like David had pride, and pride was often all that kept someone going when everything else was falling apart. She picked up her phone and dialed her HR director, Patricia Williams. "Patricia, I need you to create a job opening," Catherine said without preamble. "Facilities management, entry level, but with growth potential. Someone with engineering background preferred." "What department?" Patricia asked, clearly confused. "I wasn't aware we had budget approval for new facilities staff." "My budget," Catherine said firmly. "Make it happen. Full benefits package, health insurance that covers pre-existing conditions, and I want it posted at every employment agency in the city by tomorrow." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Catherine had built her company by being decisive, but this seemed unusually urgent even for her. "Can I ask what this is about?" "Personal matter," Catherine replied. "Just trust me on this one. And Patricia, make sure the job description mentions that single parents are strongly encouraged to apply. Flexible scheduling for family emergencies." After hanging up, Catherine called her friend Robert Chen, who ran the largest employment agency in the downtown area. Robert owed her several favors from business deals over the years. "Robert, I need you to do something for me," she said. "I'm going to send you a resume and a job posting. I need you to make sure this particular person gets a call about the position." "Catherine, you know I can't just hand-pick candidates," Robert protested. "There are ethics rules, fair hiring practices." "I'm not asking you to hire him," Catherine interrupted. "I'm asking you to make sure he knows about an opportunity he's perfectly qualified for." "There's a difference," Robert sighed. "Send me the information. But if this backfires, I never heard from you." Catherine's next call was to Dr. Martinez, Lily's physician, whose office she discovered through the investigation. This conversation required more delicacy. "Dr. Martinez, this is Catherine Richardson from Richardson Technologies. I'm calling about one of your patients, Lily Rodriguez." "I'm sorry, but I can't discuss patient information," Dr. Martinez said immediately. "I understand completely," Catherine said, "but I'm calling to tell you that an anonymous donor has established a medical fund to help with her ongoing asthma treatment. All costs will be covered going forward." There was a long pause. "I don't understand. Who is this anonymous donor?" "Someone who believes every child deserves proper medical care," Catherine said simply. "The fund will handle all current and future expenses related to her condition. Can you arrange to have the family contacted?" "This is unusual," Dr. Martinez said slowly. "Are you sure this is legitimate?" Catherine rattled off her company's information and credentials. "Feel free to verify everything. The money will be transferred to a medical trust account by the end of the week." Her next stop was more delicate. Catherine drove to David's neighborhood, parking across from his small apartment building. She wasn't there to see him. She just wanted to understand where he lived, what his daily life looked like. The building was old but clean, with small windows and a narrow front door. She could see children's drawings taped to one of the second-floor windows, probably Lily's artwork. The thought of that little girl creating colorful pictures in their tiny apartment, trying to brighten their difficult life, made Catherine's chest tighten. She knocked on the door of the first-floor apartment. An elderly woman answered, looking suspicious until Catherine introduced herself as someone interested in helping local families in need. Mrs. Rodriguez? The woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Santos shook her head. Different family. But yes, I know David and little Lily upstairs. Hardest working man I've ever seen. That little girl is an angel too, always so polite. Are they having financial difficulties? Catherine asked carefully. Mrs. Santos looked around nervously, then whispered, Between you and me, they're behind on rent. The landlord's been by twice this week. David works all the time, but it's never enough with the medical bills and everything. That little girl needs special medicine that costs a fortune. Catherine's heart broke a little more. What if someone wanted to help anonymously? How would they go about it? You mean like a charity? Mrs. Santos asked hopefully. Something like that, Catherine said. 2 days later, David came home from his warehouse job to find an official-looking envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a letter from something called the Metropolitan Family Assistance Foundation, informing him that his family had been selected to receive emergency housing assistance. David read the letter 3 times, not believing it. According to the document, an anonymous donor had established a fund to help working families facing temporary hardship. They would pay his back rent and cover his housing costs for the next 6 months, giving him time to get back on his feet. Daddy, what's wrong? Lily asked, noticing his shocked expression. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart, David said, picking her up and spinning her around. Something wonderful just happened. We don't have to worry about the rent anymore. Really? Lily's face lit up. Does that mean we can stay here? We can stay here, David confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. The next morning brought another surprise. David's phone rang while he was getting ready for work. Mr. Rodriguez? This is Janet from City Employment Services. We have a position that might be perfect for you. David listened as she described a facilities management job at Richardson Technologies. The pay was almost double what he made at both his current jobs combined. Full health insurance, flexible scheduling. They were specifically looking for someone with engineering background who understood building systems and maintenance. It sounds too good to be true, David said honestly. The company is very particular about finding the right person, Janet replied. Someone with your education and work ethic. Are you interested in interviewing? That afternoon, David found himself in the gleaming offices of Richardson Technologies, wearing his best shirt and the only tie he owned. The building was impressive, all glass and steel, with modern artwork and comfortable furniture in the lobby. The interview was with Tom Bradley, the facilities director, who turned out to be down-to-earth and easy to talk with. Your resume is interesting, Tom said, looking over David's application. Engineering degree, but you've been working warehouse and retail jobs. What happened? David hesitated, then decided honesty was his only option. My daughter has severe asthma. When she was diagnosed, I needed flexibility to take care of her medical needs. My previous job couldn't accommodate that, so I took work that let me be there for her emergencies. Tom nodded approvingly. Family comes first. I respect that. This position would actually work well for a single parent. We have excellent health coverage, and if you need to leave for a family emergency, just let me know. You'd really be okay with that? David asked, hardly believing it. Mr. Rodriguez, we judge people by their work quality, not their personal situations. Your references say you're reliable, honest, and hardworking. That's what matters to us. The interview lasted an hour, covering technical questions about building systems, electrical work, and maintenance procedures. David found himself relaxing as he realized his engineering background had prepared him well for this type of work. When would you be able to start? Tom asked. You're offering me the job? David asked, stunned. Assuming your references check out, yes. The salary is $62,000 annually, plus full benefits. Health insurance starts immediately. David's hands started shaking. $62,000 was more than he'd made in the last 2 years combined. That evening, David sat on his couch with Lily, both of them eating ice cream sundaes to celebrate. "Daddy, why are you crying?" Lily asked, noticing the tears on his face. "Happy tears, baby," David said, hugging her close. "These are the happiest tears I've ever cried. Is it because of your new job?" "It's because things are finally going to be okay for us," David said. "You're going to get the best medical care, and we're going to find a better apartment and maybe even get a car again." "And pancakes for breakfast?" Lily asked hopefully. David laughed through his tears. "All the pancakes you want." What David didn't know was that across town, Catherine was sitting in her own living room, reading the report from Tom Bradley about the successful interview. "He's perfect for the position," Tom had written. "Overqualified if anything, but eager to work and grateful for the opportunity. I think he'll be a tremendous asset to our team." Catherine smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fireplace crackling nearby. Phase 1 of her plan was complete. David now had a stable job with good benefits, and his housing situation was secure, but she wasn't done yet. Catherine had spent her entire career believing that success came from hard work and smart decisions. But David had taught her something different. Sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply show kindness to another human being who needed help. She was about to show David exactly how powerful that lesson could be. In 2 weeks, Richardson Technologies would be holding their quarterly employee meeting. It would be the perfect time for Catherine and David to meet again. David had been working at Richardson Technologies for exactly 3 weeks, and he still couldn't believe this was his life now. Every morning when he walked into the clean, bright building, he felt like he was living someone else's dream. The work was challenging but manageable. His co-workers were friendly, and for the first time in years, he wasn't exhausted every single day. The best part was coming home to Lily with energy left to actually spend time with her. Last night they'd worked on a science project together, building a volcano that would erupt with baking soda and vinegar. 3 months ago, David would have been too tired to help with homework, let alone a fun project like that. "Good morning, David," called Patricia from HR as he walked past her office. "Don't forget about the quarterly meeting this afternoon. All employees are required to attend." David nodded and smiled. He'd heard about these meetings from his co-workers. The company CEO would give updates about business, they'd recognize outstanding employees, and there would be refreshments afterward. It sounded nice, though David was a little nervous about being in a room with the big bosses. He was still the newest employee in his department. The morning flew by as David worked on updating the building security system. It was the kind of technical work he'd missed during his years at the warehouse and grocery store. Using his brain instead of just his muscles felt good, reminded him of who he used to be before life got so complicated. At lunch, David called Lily's school to check on her. Her asthma hadn't acted up in weeks, not since she'd started getting better medication through their new insurance. The school nurse, Mrs. Peterson, had even commented on how much more energy Lily had during recess. "Everything's great, Mr. Rodriguez," Mrs. Peterson told him. "Lily's having a wonderful day. She's so excited about showing you her art project when you get home." David hung up the phone with a smile. Simple things like being able to leave work to pick up his daughter if she got sick, or knowing she had proper medical care, had changed everything. He'd been carrying stress for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to just breathe normally. At 2 p.m., David joined about 200 other employees in the company's main conference room. He found a seat toward the back, still feeling like the new guy despite his coworkers' efforts to make him feel welcome. The room was buzzing with conversation as people caught up with colleagues from other departments. "Ladies and gentlemen," came a voice from the front, "please welcome our CEO, Catherine Richardson." David looked up as an elegant woman in her 50s walked to the podium. She was wearing a navy blue business suit and had the kind of confident presence that commanded attention. Something about her seemed familiar, but David couldn't place where he might have seen her before. Catherine began talking about the company's recent successes, new contracts they'd won, and plans for expansion. She was clearly intelligent and passionate about the business she'd built. David found himself impressed by how she talked about their employees as family, not just workers. "Before we get to recognition awards," Catherine continued, "I want to share something personal with all of you. 3 weeks ago, I had an experience that reminded me why character matters more than credentials. why kindness is more valuable than profit, and why the best people aren't always the ones with the most impressive resumes. David shifted in his seat, wondering where this was going. Catherine's voice grew softer, more emotional. I was mugged downtown on a Friday night. I lost everything, my purse, my phone, my way to get home. I sat on a subway platform, scared and alone, while dozens of people walked past me like I was invisible. David's breath caught in his throat. His heart started beating faster as a memory pushed its way to the surface. But then, Catherine continued, a man stopped to help me. A man who had clearly worked a long, hard day. A man who probably had his own problems and his own family to worry about. He sat with me, listened to my story, and gave me $10 so I could get home safely. David's hands began to tremble. The navy blue coat. The scratches on her hands. The way she'd cried when he'd given her the money. This man asked for nothing in return. He wouldn't even tell me his last name. He just said that everyone deserves to get home to their family, and that I should help someone else someday if I saw them in trouble. The room had gone completely silent. David stared at Catherine, his mouth dry, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. Catherine's eyes scanned the audience. That man's name was David, and David, if you're out there somewhere, I want you to know that your kindness changed my life. Not because of the $10, but because you reminded me that there are still good people in this world who help others without expecting anything in return. David wanted to sink into his chair and disappear. He wanted to run out of the room, but he couldn't move. He could barely breathe. Catherine continued, I spent weeks trying to find this David to thank him properly. And you know what I discovered? That sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. She paused and looked directly at the back of the room, her eyes finding David's. David Rodriguez, would you please stand up? Every head in the room turned toward David. He felt his face burning with embarrassment as he slowly stood up, his legs shaking. 3 weeks ago, Catherine said, her voice warm but strong enough for everyone to hear. David Rodriguez started working here as our new facilities manager. He has no idea that I'm the woman he helped that night. David, would you please come up here? The walk to the front of the room felt like it took forever. David's co-workers were smiling and applauding, but he barely noticed. He kept staring at Catherine, still trying to process what was happening. When he reached the front, Catherine stepped away from the microphone and spoke quietly, just to him. Hello, David, it's good to see you again. Catherine, David whispered. You're the CEO? I don't understand. The woman you helped that night, she said softly, was me. I was coming back from a late board meeting when I was mugged. I was scared and lost, and you were the only person who stopped to help. David's eyes filled with tears. I had no idea. You needed help. Exactly, Catherine said. You didn't help me because you knew who I was or what I could do for you. You helped me because it was the right thing to do. She turned back to the microphone, addressing the room again. David doesn't know this yet, but his kindness that night started a chain of events. When I learned about his situation, his dedication to his daughter, his work ethic, his character, I knew I had to create opportunities for him. Not as charity, but because good people deserve good things. David stared at her in shock. The job? The medical fund for Lily? That was all? That was all you, Catherine said firmly. Your kindness earned it. Your character deserved it. Your dedication to your daughter inspired it. The room erupted in applause, but David barely heard it. His mind was reeling, trying to understand everything that had happened. David, Catherine said, her voice gentle, I have one more thing to tell you. Richardson Technologies is starting a scholarship program for children of employees who show exceptional character and determination. The first recipient is going to be a 9-year-old girl named Lily, whose father taught me that true wealth isn't about money. It's about how we treat each other. David completely broke down then, tears streaming down his face as the reality hit him. Everything that had happened, all the good fortune, the job, the medical help, it all came back to that night on the subway platform when he'd chosen to help a stranger. After the meeting, David sat in Catherine's office, still trying to process everything. Why didn't you just tell me who you were? He asked. Because, Catherine said, you would have been too proud to accept help from the woman you'd helped. You would have seen it as charity instead of what it really was, recognition of your worth. I still can't believe this is real, David said. Catherine smiled. It's real. And David, this is just the beginning. You've got potential that goes far beyond facilities management. I'd like to put you in our management training program, if you're interested. David thought about Lily, about the life they could build now, about all the possibilities that had opened up because he'd chosen to be kind to a stranger. I'd like that very much, he said. 6 months later, David was managing an entire team, and Lily was thriving in a special program for gifted students. But every Friday evening, he still carried that same $10 bill in his wallet. Not the original one Catherine had returned to him, but a new one that reminded him of the most important lesson he'd ever learned. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes in our lives. And sometimes, when you help someone else get home to their family, you end up finding your own way home too.